The King and the Shark by Christopher Mark Middlebrooks. 1. The first time Elvis Presley saved my life was in September 1970. I was speeding down the streets of Memphis, Tennessee at the witching hour, 12 a.m. It's a peculiar time of night regardless of the superstitions and old wives' tales about it. It always seemed to me what tiny light the full moon gave off at midnight somehow made the empty road seem even more barren and dark. This, unfortunately, managed to make me feel even lonelier. You see, I had just made my way out of Kentucky. The rain there is depressing as it is unforgivingly cold, and I was eager to be back home in Texas. So I decided to take a back road going 180 miles per hour in my red Volvo 68P 1-800S. I needed to be in Arkansas by 1:30 a.m. to make a board meeting at 6 a.m. for my fishing company. If I could make it to the hotel in time, I could rest up, have a few drinks, then have the meeting and continue my journey around 10 a.m. I was making my way back to the great state of Texas. I planned to move the rest of my stuff from Texas to the halfway house in Louisville, Kentucky, so that way when I fully settled my business in Florida, the trip wouldn't be as brutal. My local fishing business in Galveston, Texas was expanding to Florida in October. I wasn't going to make it unless I went full throttle. As I was speeding down the road at 180 miles per hour, the radio began to play Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley. Ironically enough, I never cared much for Elvis, or rather I was neutral to his music. My mother and father, on the other hand, loved Elvis. Mother would always play his 45s and records every Sunday after church. My dad forced me to watch GI Blues every 4th of July, and after the film we would ceremoniously pop an Elvis Presley firecracker. So I was always familiar with his music and movies, but never went out of my way to put his stuff on. The Memphis road was dark and seemed to go on for eternity as Jailhouse Rock blared from my stereo. I managed to clock 190 miles per hour before I saw red and blue light dispel the darkness behind me. The awful siren was somehow louder than the Elvis music blaring in my car. I didn't pull over immediately because I thought it was a local construction crew trying to take advantage of their sirens to pass me. As I clocked closer to 200, the car behind me was tailing me. I heard a familiar voice demand me to pull over. It said, "Texas, pull over, baby." I soon realized that the law was on my tail. I do confess that I did think to just hightail it back into Arkansas where this police officer's jurisdiction would end. Yet I remember my mother always telling me what the good book says, to be submissive to the established authorities. I never pleased my mother while she was alive, and holding on to the hopes of an afterlife, I decided to honor my mother's teachings and pulled my red 68 Volvo over. The police car soon stopped behind me. Sighing, I put the vehicle in park and rolled down my window. I noticed Jailhouse Rock was still blaring from my car stereo, so I quickly turned the volume down. The police officer approached my car door and said in a remarkably familiar voice, "License and registration, please." I looked up to see if the police officer was messing around with me. His voice sounded like Elvis Presley, and at first encounter I thought it was a local cop having a laugh at me. He must have heard me listening to Jailhouse Rock and wanted to poke fun at me. However, to my amazement, it was actually Elvis Presley himself. He had his police badge out and began to speak, showing me his badge, which he seemed proud of. The King said to me, "You were going pretty fast back there, man. I clocked you in at about 197 miles per hour. You're like a bat out of hell, man. Slow down, baby. You could hurt yourself or somebody else. There's no reason to speed. If you don't mind me asking, where are you heading at this ungodly hour and at such speed, man?" I was flabbergasted and thought that the half bottle of Jim Beam I had earlier was finally starting to take effect. To my surprise, it wasn't a drunken hallucination, for before my very eyes was Elvis Presley himself. He was dressed in long blue-black coat that covered his signature Elvis suit. I looked towards his hand and saw his various diamond rings, full of all kinds of carats of gold. I noticed his famous taking care of business ring, TCB. I looked up into his eyes that were hiding behind gold sunglasses. His hair looked immaculate, and his fateful sideburns looked recently attended. The king of rock and roll himself was standing before me and asking me why I was breaking the law. Before I could collect my thoughts, I noticed Elvis seemed to be in admiration over my car. He began to admire and said, "You got a nice Volvo, man. Looks like a red Volvo 68P 1-800S, baby. I have the same car, but it's blue because blue symbolizes dreams, man. You into esotericism? No? That's alright, a lot of people aren't. I have a dream, man. I dream, baby. I'm the king. I know you dream too, baby. You know who said that, man? Yes, you do, because you have an education, man. Woo! His car, dog, baby. I have 3 Cadillacs in my house in Denver. I use them when I'm doing police work there, man. Most people don't know I'm a police officer, but it's true. Fun fact, man, I like to put a cassette in and listen to a little CCR, man. Little Creedence Clearwater Revival. CCR, you like that, man? Proud Mary? I played that song live at Madison Square Garden. New York, man, you been there? Elvis looked at me, gazing at me to see if I was drunk. He even sniffed his nose. I'm sure he smelt the bourbon on my breath. I was very drunk, and the half bottle of Jim Beam I drank before I hit the road was kicking in. Elvis had to know I was drunk, and I knew I seemed fearful and in shock at this entire encounter. The king just smiled kindly at me as I dumbfoundedly asked, Mr. Presley, is that really you? The king laughed and showed me his badge again. I noticed he had a gun holstered on his hip. The gun was made of pure gold. He showed me his badge, and I saw that he was a Memphis police officer with the rank of captain. There was no doubt this was Elvis himself, even though it was hard to fathom such an encounter. As I was processing being before Elvis Presley himself, he said very calmly, "License and registration, please." I nodded my head and took out my driver's license and registration papers. The king took it and looked at it. His eyes got big and he said, "Texas plate and license. You down here seeing family or in the process of moving to Tennessee, man?" I composed myself as best I could at this surreal encounter and replied to Elvis, saying, no, I'm in the process of moving my business and myself to Florida. I'm just using my mother's old halfway house in Kentucky to ease the moving process." Elvis looked over my identification and replied calmly, saying, "What's the name of your company?" I pulled out a business card of King Shark Fishery. I handed it to him, saying, "King Shark Fishery? Well, we specialize in seafood, fishing gear, and boats." Mr. Presley nodded his head and put the card in his jacket pocket. He said, "So you're speeding to make it to the Lone Star State, to move to Kentucky, to later move to Florida, to set up King Shark Fishery?" I nodded and said, "To be honest with you, sir, I guess I'm really just speeding because I have a meeting for my company at 6 a.m. at the hotel." Elvis nodded his head and then related to me, saying, "Which hotel?" I froze in fear, forgetting the name of the hotel, but remembering the highway, I said as peaceful as possible, "The one off I-40. Elvis nodded in response and stood up straighter. He then said, "So really you're just trying to take care of business, man. I can respect that." Elvis then showed me his ring. He said, "Always take care of business, man. TCB is the way to go." Then Elvis turned around to look up at the full moon and said, "It's a full moon, man. The werewolves will be out tonight, I know they will. You know, my mom always said nothing good ever happened after dark. Just think if you hit a puddle or a gust of wind knocked down a tree and blocked the road, you could have died and missed the beauty of the good Lord's luminary. It's the second luminary, man. That's what the good book says, so it's true. Do you know what else the truth is? Is that you wouldn't be able to howl anymore like a werewolf or hound dog does. Chill out, man! Ow! Elvis quickly started to howl at the moon like a wolf. I was rather confused at this behavior, but nevertheless he howled even louder. He then started to do a kata that is common in karate. After he finished his kata, he composed himself in what seemed like a zen state. He then handed me back my license and registration and then went on a long tangent stating, "Well, man, I'm going to tell you the truth. There's never been a reason to speed to get to any destination ever recorded in the history of man. You think the king got to where he got by speeding? No, man. The only way you can really take care of business is by taking your time and working hard, baby. You could have lost your life tonight. Deer jump out on this road all the time and could have hit your precious Volvo 68 P1800S, baby. At your speed, this red 68 Beauty would be destroyed, man. Even worse, your life would have been forfeited, and you would have returned to that spirit in the sky. The good Lord would be before you, and He is King of Kings. His hand is in my hand, if you know what I'm saying. Jesus is the way. That great King has sent you the King of Rock and Roll to tell you, baby. Just slow it down. Slow it down. You can take care of business, go on the speed limit, and don't let anyone tell you different, man. I'm going to let you off with a warning this time, and here, take this." Elvis then pulled out a picture or what seemed like a ticket out. He began to sign it and write a motivational text. He handed me the photo of himself. It was of him at the 68 Comeback Christmas Special. I noticed his autograph and quote that said, Taking care of business at a reasonable speed is the key to survival. When the waves of life seem too hard and monsters are all around you, slow and steady is the only way to truly TCB. Signed, Elvis Presley. He then looked at me and carried nodding. He said, "You're free to go, baby, but if you speed down these roads again, that's a ticket and a night in the jail. And there won't be no jailhouse or rockin' either, man. You be safe now, and I'll try to visit your fisherman's store, King Shark Fishery in Florida one day, man. Until then, stay safe and may God bless you, baby." Elvis did a bow, then went back to his car, driving off. I sat in my car for a while, listening to the end of Jailhouse Rock. It was 12:25 a.m., and I had 45 minutes to get to the hotel. I looked at the Elvis picture, stupefied that I just met the king of rock and roll. As the famous song Jailhouse Rock ended, I put my car in gear and headed to the hotel in Arkansas. As I drove deeper into Arkansas, I saw that a massive tree had indeed fallen into the road. If I was still tracking at the speed I was going, it would have been the death of me. I stopped the car and got out to look at the tree. I then turned to look at the moon. I began to giggle as I remembered the king howling like a mad dog, or rather a werewolf. And great thanks that air was still filling my lungs and my beautiful Volvo unharmed, I began to howl at the moon like a hound dog. 2. 7 years later, I moved to Florida, and by 1977, my business was booming. King Shark Fishery had become the premium boat and fisherman's store of the state. Food reviewers also remarked on how original and new my seafood tasted. I specialized in all the exotic seafood obtainable, such as swordfish, monkfish, seahorses, opah, and shark, as well as the basics like salmon, shrimp, tuna, etc. I had never been happier or more successful as a businessman. That encounter with Elvis in the 70s changed my life for the better. I don't want to sound alarming, but I began to take Elvis' advice to heart, to take things slow. I stopped drinking as much and eventually quit altogether, only savoring a nice shot on January 8th, the birthday of Elvis Presley. I started to live my life slowly as well as take my business slow. It turns out the meeting I was going to have on that fateful night was only going to be with a bunch of charlatans. Elvis Presley even saved my business. If I had signed their contracts, they would have stolen my company from right underneath me. As justice would have it, the company got caught using child slave labor and collapsed with all their other subsidiary companies. King Shark Fishery was about to be a subsidiary if I had gone to that meeting. Instead, I decided to go to a hotel that was 25 miles back. I stopped there and rested up, for I was too drunk to be on the road, and as the king says, you can take care of business without speeding and without rushing. I would start taking care of business one day at a time. Elvis Presley advice gave me a chance to redefine who I was. I ended up getting married to a gorgeous woman named Lisa. We had a happy, healthy marriage for about 5 years. Ultimately, Lisa ended up divorcing me because in her eyes I was taking this Elvis thing too far. But she didn't understand what Elvis did for me. For us. She began to resent me and say spiteful things like I would rather have sex with Elvis than her. This is not true. I'm not homosexual or even bisexual, but a straight man like Elvis. Just something changed in me after that experience, and I could no longer resist to kiss the precious lips of Elvis on all my records. My wife was very distraught when I bought a male mannequin. I clothed it with the leather replica outfit of Elvis 68 Comeback Special. I found the best Elvis wig I could find and placed it upon the mannequin. Once my Elvis doll was complete, I would put on an Elvis 45, Love Me Tender, and begin to gently dance with Elvis. To kiss Elvis, to softly caress his chest as he would serenade me with his beautiful voice. Love Me Tender would be on max volume, and only then would I lick the mannequin's face that had the most realistic face I could possibly afford. In all the despair of my divorce, Elvis was still there for me. He would watch games with me. We both would marvel at the news and question if our dream of a better future were even possible. I Love Lucy was our favorite show to watch together. Elvis always got wild on that one. It was only late at night when Elvis would seem distant. He would sulk in the corner and weep. I would always ask him what was wrong and that he could talk to me. One night when it was raining really hard, he finally told me why he was weeping. He said that my divorce reminded him of his divorce with Priscilla. Elvis would hold me as I cried. He would tell me that I would find someone else one day. Elvis began to fill me with such joy that I soon realized I had mental illness. It wasn't okay to pretend that all of Elvis was my friend. I knew deep down that the only way I could really take care of business was to let this all go and focus on my business. So, I got healthy again and burned the Elvis doll in a fire pit while crying. Somehow, in some way, this holocaust of my Elvis stuff saved me mentally and emotionally. As I watched Elvis burn to a crisp, the pain and horror of my divorce went with the flames. I decided it was time to find a healthier way to love and find joy in Elvis. So, I created the Taking Care of Business, TCB Burger. Strange for a seafood place to sell a burger, but some sailors and fishermen don't like to eat fish. Turns out the burger was such a success that Presley Enterprise wanted a cut. I gladly gave it and took their blessing as an honor. Seeing people eat the Presley burger and then discuss better times in their lives filled my heart with joy. I soon realized that Elvis transcended everything I thought about him. He really is what the American dream is, to come from nothing and become the king of the world. I saw so many servicemen speak of his time in the Army. I had to buy a poster of GI Blues and soon made various Elvis booths in my restaurant for the various customers who came only for the TCB burger. I had Jailhouse Rock, Return to Cinder, GI Blues, and Christmas Elvis sections. Too many avoided the Christmas sections until winter, though, so I ended up adding the 68 special Elvis section. This brought back so many memories of the doll and how I lost the love of my life over Elvis. Unfortunately, I started to have a little resentment towards Elvis in this moment. He may have saved my life, but he made me lose my world. As fate would have it, in this moment of resentment and painful memories is when Aurora walked into my life. She sat at the 68 special booth and ordered a TCB. I was so attracted to her. It was clear that a mystical, esoteric meeting was happening. I truly found my soulmate. Aurora looked like a rockabilly version of Priscilla, a femme fatale right out of the 60s. She told me to sit down and the rest is history. We got married on Halloween, October 31st, 1976, and had our honeymoon at Graceland. All the roads of my life led to Elvis Presley. Once again, Elvis began to fill my heart with joy. The joy I felt soon turned into the deepest sorrow on that fateful August evening in 1977. I turned on the news to see that Elvis Presley had died at his home in Graceland at the age of 42. This heartbreaking news made me face my own mortality, especially being only 33 myself. As I was pondering my own death, my wife died of a heart attack. She somehow loved Elvis more than me and died on hearing the news from a broken heart. As she fell dead into my arms, I screamed in painful sorrow. Not only did I lose the king, but my faithful wife, Aurora, who loved Elvis more than me. After a couple of years of therapy and reevaluating my life on the anniversary of my wife and Elvis' death, I began to remember healthier times. Of course, all this made me recall the time Elvis pulled me over 7 years ago. I looked to the frame behind the main counter and gazed at Elvis and his 68 comeback special. I looked at his autograph and repeated the words he wrote. After I buried my newly deceased wife, I decided to take it slow and take care of business once more. As time went on, my business excelled into one of the largest restaurants and boat sellers in the South. By 1979, I had become a millionaire and decided that I would celebrate my success by taking a boat trip to the Atlantic Ocean with my apprentice Jerry Smith. I did what Elvis suggested and took my time, going at a slow pace, and before I knew it, I had more money than I knew what to do with. I used this newfound tactic of doing a little TCB and bought an impressive yacht. It was a new model called Hatteras Enclosed Bridge, a Samurai 1, which I called the Tiger Man in honor of Elvis Presley. Jerry was eager to set sail to the Atlantic, but I was not entirely ready yet. It would be in late October, around the week of Halloween, that we would set sail to fish and obtain more meat to sell in the shops. It would be a small crew, including me and Jerry Smith and 3 of his friends, Mark, Jacob, and Kevin. These fine men had vast experience being on the high seas, and they had already proved themselves to be on previous voyages. As the last week of October came upon us, the crew said goodbye to our loved ones and set sail for the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is a beautiful, remarkable sight. The seagulls overfilled with the air, singing their songs as the wrath of Poseidon waves crashed upon the Tiger Man. The yacht held up as we sojourned deeper into the Atlantic Ocean. We were heading into a storm, but it was nothing the Tiger Man couldn't manage. So as captain of the vessel, I commanded the crew to journey onwards. Little did I know this would seal our doom forever. 3. The storm was starting to become harsh, yet the Tigerman proceeded onwards, braving the wrath of the sea. I quickly spun the starboard wheel, screaming at Jerry to secure the cargo below deck. He screamed, "Aye, aye, Captain!" Before we knew it, a massive wave had come upon us. I quickly screamed, "Brace yourself!" Spinning the wheel as fast as I could, I navigated the vessel over the big wave. Jerry fell down, but quickly rose as we passed the cruel wave. I heard Jacob scream, "Captain, we need to sail eastward away from this storm. I don't think the Tigerman can handle the stresses of the full storm." Jerry ran out to go below deck to do as I commanded. Mark gave off a harsh cough as I looked at Jacob, who was in the process of gazing over the map again. Mark then turned on the radio to reveal an emergency broadcast. The broadcast was talking about a Category 4 storm that was heading inland. Mark gasped as the radio foretold our doom. Jacob was using a square and compass to try to navigate us out of the storm based upon the map and radio information. He nodded and said, "Captain, I recommend that we turn east, then we can escape the storm." Mark shook his head in defiance and said, "Captain, that's not sound waters either." I nodded, knowing that this was shark territory, but I couldn't just let us all drown and die. We set sail eastward to escape the storm. Then we wait it out and head back inland after we go west. It's the safest and sensible route. Mark shook his head in doubt but said, "Aye, aye, Captain." I heard Kevin give off a scream. I looked out the window and saw another harsh wave come. Jerry came back on starboard, quickly trying to help Kevin on his feet. I began to turn the Tigerman around, attempting to head eastward out of this hellish storm. The radio kept giving off hellish static as Kevin and Jerry came inside the quarters. Kevin locked and secured the door as Jerry came over to me panting. Kevin said, "My God, Captain, Poseidon himself is trying to kill us." Jerry nodded and said, "Everything is secure below deck. We did lose a couple of fish, but nothing we can't regain if we can escape the storm." I nodded and said in confidence, "We shall escape it. The Tigerman is not only the king of the jungle, but of the high seas as well. Onwards!" A massive wave quickly fell upon us, causing the Tigerman to almost flip over. I quickly spun the wheel to meet the wave and thought death almost found us. Yet Providence would have us surpass the wave and move us further eastward. The crew were all screaming and falling on deck as I spun the wheel once again. If we could make it about another mile, we would escape this hellish typhoon and be free from the sea's wrath. Thunder and lightning went off as rain hit the glass harder. It was starting to become impossible to see. Jerry fainted in fear as a massive wave was approaching us. I heard Mark begin a soft prayer and even saw him cross himself. Kevin and Jacob closed their eyes, accepting whatever fate was about to fall on us. The radio static became louder as the waves hit the Tigerman. I spun the ship wheel as fast as I could, trying to turn northeast away from the center of the storm. The wave was faster and quickly turned us overboard. Everything happened so fast. I heard the men scream as glass broke. Sounds of wood snapping met my ears as great pain began to be felt in my head. It was clear we were sinking and flipping, but somehow we were reflipped upward, almost shooting us out of the storm. I hit my head once more, this time on the bookshelf, and fell to the wet wooden floor. I saw the top of the cabin break off, impaling Kevin instantly, his blood spattering all over the cabin. I heard Mark scream in horror. Jacob screamed as he was thrown out into the hungry sea. I felt something large and heavy hit my head. The last thing I heard was Jerry screaming, "Captain!" My eyes closed as I fell unconscious. When I came to, I was met with a very damaged vessel and crew. Kevin was still impaled, his blood spilling into the ravenous ocean. I faced a minor concussion and stood up to the sorrowful prayers of Mark. My head was throbbing with a sharp pain at the back of my skull. I used my left hand to check it, and as my hand came back to my eyes, I noticed blood on my fingers. I saw Jerry standing near Mark in shock at what had befallen the Tigerman and its crew. Jacob was nowhere to be found. Jerry, seeing me awake, or rather alive, perked up and said, "Captain, you're alive!" I could only nod because the pain was intense. The sun was outshining its cruel warmth upon a broken vessel. As consciousness was starting to come back to me, I saw that the Tigerman had been broken in 3 halves. I was separated from Jerry and Mark by a small margin. I looked about me and saw Kevin, dead eyes. I gasped as I saw his guts spilling upon the broken floor. The wooden board from above impaling him, breaking a hole in the ship. The oceans spilling into deck. I noticed my feet were in bloody waters as this part of the ship was slowly sinking into the sea. I saw the broken radio floating in the red seawater, gasping in horror at our only connection to the outside world being destroyed. Mark's prayers became louder as the wind caressed the damned crew of the Tigerman. "Jerry, baffled in amazement that I was still alive, screamed out to me, quickly running to help me get to a safer part of the broken yacht. He said, "Captain, come here and let me help you. Don't sink. I'm so glad you're alive." I met Jerry and grabbed his hand. He said, "Jacob is gone, Captain. Fell over starboard, he did. I thought you did as well. I'm so glad to see you're alive and well." Jerry grabbed my hand rather forcefully as he helped me across the broken deck. The deck soon sank further into the ocean as Jerry helped me safely across. Jerry, looking at me, said, "Captain, you're bleeding. Are you okay? Your heart, let me see." I looked around at my once beautiful yacht, tears falling down my face. I realized that we were in fact doomed. This hellish ocean felt endless. I heard Jerry say, "Just a small cut on your head. You should be fine." Jerry, seeing the blood in the water, said, "This blood, however, will attract shark in these waters. We're doomed, Captain. Only God can save us now. Let's hope Mark can convince him." Mark's laments to God were starting to irritate my already pained head. It felt like a hellish hangover. As I looked further into the barren sea, I realized that there was no one who could come to our aid, for after all, the storm had most definitely hit inland by now. All emergency sources would be too exhausted to come to our aid. Also, how would we communicate to get aid? It would be at least a week before people would even notice we were gone. As hope was banished into the coldest depths of the sea, I heard Mark scream in horror as hellish black fins came out of the bottom of the sea to quickly approach us. Mark screamed, "Shark!" 4. The shark's playful fins swam all around the fallen tiger man. Mark screamed in horror and fear as the shark approached closer to us. I gasped in fear as I saw its cruel teeth come out of the dark depths to bite at Mark. Mark screamed and fell backwards. I went to help Mark but heard something come up out of the water. I heard Jerry scream in fear and turned to look at Jerry, and I saw a hellish shark attempt to grab him and take him into the waters of hell. Jerry fell backwards and hit his head hard on the floor. He looked as if he passed out instantly. Mark began to cry in horror. I saw more fins come out of the water and swarm the area where Kevin found his demise. I could hear what sounded like sharks feasting upon my fallen friend's corpse. Mark screamed, "They're eating Kevin! No!" I gasped in fear as I saw another shark fin come up out of the infernal waters. It was swimming towards where Jerry's fallen corpse was. I saw that his hand was in the water. I came back to reality in all this frenzy of the denizens of the deep. I quickly ran to Jerry and grabbed him and moved his arm out of the water. I heard Mark scream as a massive black shark came out of the waters and grabbed Mark with its blasphemous sharp teeth. Mark screamed in horror as the shark's gruesome teeth buried themselves deep into his stomach, blood pouring out everywhere on the broken wooden deck of the Tiger Man. Mark screamed out, praying to God above, saying, "Oh God, take me to thy palace above!" His prayers to the Lord ended as the shark bit deeper into his stomach. His guts spilled out on the floor of the broken Tiger Man. Mark cried out in pain as blood poured out of his mouth. The shark released him and fell back into the deep waters of the sea. I moved Jerry to a secure place and went to go to grab Mark's body. As I approached him, Mark was convulsing in pain. The infernal black shark came out of the depth of hell and grabbed him by his left leg. Mark screamed, reaching his right hand out to me. I tried to grab his hand, but the shark quickly pulled him into the cruel sea. The deep blue sea soon turned red from Mark's blood. I gasped in horror, having tears fall from my eyes. Before I could fully process what was happening, another shark came and hit the broken Tiger Man. This caused me to almost fall over deck. Thankfully, I caught myself on the edge of the broken Tiger Man. I saw a shark come out of the waves trying to bite my face. A massive maw full of razor-sharp teeth came out of the infernal waters. I gasped in horror as it snipped at my face, only missing me by a margin. I heard Jerry begin to cough. I quickly pulled myself back up and away from these infernal beasts. Jerry stood up looking around his surroundings. He saw that at least 8 sharks surrounded us. I looked at Jerry in fear and condolence as I saw 8 more shark fins come to feast on Kevin and Mark's corpses. Jerry looked about at all the mutilation. I tried to speak to him, but was too shocked at the loss of Mark. Tears fell down from my eyes. Jerry gasped as he pointed behind me. I turned to look at what he was trying to show me. I gasped in despondency as a massive shark, bigger than the others, came up to flirt with the fallen Tiger Man. I said, "Jerry, I take full responsibility for the loss of the Tiger Man and its crew. Mark, Jacob, and Kevin's death are all on my hands. I failed you and the crew. I could have navigated us west-south to pass the storm as well. It would have caused us to lose some profit, but I sacrificed that to doom us all. I'm so very sorry." Jerry, with tears in his own eyes, said, "Aye, Captain, you did doom us all." Yet we all chose to come here on this vessel. You and the Tiger Man never failed us before. Your wisdom and judgment has never failed us. We all make mistakes every once in a while, and just because you failed us once doesn't mean you failed us all. It honestly seems that Poseidon himself had other plans for us. I just hope Mark is correct and his God and prayers could save at least one of us. It was an honor to sail with you all these years. I have no regrets, and it's an honor to die by your side. Before I could reply, the infernal large beast came out of the waters to bite at me. The mass of this magnificent beast caused me to fall down. Jerry screamed in horror as he fell backwards, falling into the cruel red waters. I fell face first on the broken wooden deck. I lost 2 teeth when my face collided with the floor. Before I could scream, I heard Jerry gargle as sharks swarmed him, quickly ripping him apart. I looked up in shock at seeing him torn into pieces by 3 sharks. His dignity the beast did not care for. They ripped and tore into his fragile flesh. One of the beasts bit off his left hand, while another shark devoured his right leg. Jerry's muffled scream filled my ears as I felt pain in my legs. I turned to see a massive shark begin to devour me, feet first. I screamed in horror as this massive black shark began to eat me alive. I screamed, "Jerry, I love you!" I heard Jerry scream one final death cry as the sharks devoured him. I began to cry in horror as this massive black shark flipped me around. I tried to use what was left of my feet to kick at the shark. Its infernal teeth savagely tore into my legs. I screamed in horror as I fell deeper into the devil's mouth, what seemed like razors biting into my stomach. Blood poured out of my mouth as the creature began to move its devilish head to the left and right. I was being eaten alive. God had abandoned me and the Tiger Man. As I cried out, I fell into despair and was in the process of giving up the ghost. I closed my eyes, ready to meet death. My mind thought on to what Elvis Presley said all those years ago. I whispered aloud, "Taking care of business at a reasonable speed is the key to survival. When the ways of life seem too hard and monsters are all around you, slow and steady is the only way to TCB." I felt the shark's eager teeth bite deeper into my legs. I gave off a small cry of pain and closed my eyes, awaiting death. It was then that I heard a peculiar sound, as if a police siren was going off. I smiled, remembering Elvis pulling me over all those years ago. Before I could open my eyes, gunshots sounded off from a pistol. I quickly opened my eyes and saw the shark that was in the process of eating me was suddenly shot by a police officer. I screamed in pain and horror. A police officer boat quickly approached the fallen Tiger Man. In great relief, I saw Elvis Presley come upon the fallen Tiger Man. I cried out, saying, "Help me, the shark is eating me!" Elvis calmly said, "That's no shark, man. That's the devil in disguise." I gasped in amazement as Elvis Presley had 2 golden pistols drawn. He began to open fire on the shark that was trying to eat me. The shark gave off a grunt as the king himself shot the beast in its brain. Elvis then holstered his left gun. He then held out his left hand to me. He said, "Texas, we can't go on with suspicious minds. It's really me, the king, so grab my hand, baby." I grabbed the king's hand. He pulled me out of Satan's maw and saved me from certain death. Before I could really grasp the situation, I saw the king pull out his other pistol. He began to shoot at the sharks that were devouring Mark and Jerry. He killed at least 2 of them before he needed to reload each pistol. He said, "Look out, man!" He threw the pistol he had in his left hand up in the sky. He then quickly reloaded the golden pistol out in his right hand. He then holstered it and did a quick spin dance like he used to on stage. He then started to do a kata. A massive shark came out of the waters and he kicked it with his right leg, giving off a kia. He then gave a quick right hook to another shark that dared to eat me. He said, "Look out, man, the king's got a black belt, baby." By this time, the golden pistol had come back to him. He span around, catching and exiting the golden clip. He then calmly reloaded the gun. He then aimed the pistol at me, but said, "Move your head to the left, baby." I did as the king commanded. I closed my eyes as the first round fired off from his magnificent left gun. I felt shark blood cover my face as the king unloaded his pistol on the shark. I opened my eyes and saw the king standing near me. He then pulled out his other pistol and made quick work of the other sharks that were swarming the fallen Tiger Man. I saw the king kill 3 sharks in rapid fire. He then span around and holstered the right gun. Mr. Presley then used the last remaining bullets on another shark that dared to come ashore. He quickly reloaded his pistol and holstered it. I looked to the right and saw that one of the sharks was trying to flank the king. Before I could warn Elvis, the beast jumped out of the seas to devour him. Elvis smirked at me, did a spin kick, and knocked the shark back in the waves. He then landed like what seemed like a superhero from a comic book. Standing up in great confidence, the king quickly reloaded his other gun. He then pulled out his other gun and opened fire on the shark he had just kicked. Elvis fired many rounds with both guns into the infernal beast, killing it fast. The sharks had been bested. I gasped in wonder at the sight of Elvis Presley. How was this possible? The king had been dead for years, yet here he was saving me from sharks. The king smelt the air and said, "The devil is still here, man, seeking to devour your soul. That's okay, man, because if you're looking for trouble, you've come to the right place." Elvis Presley began to sing one of his most iconic songs. As the massive shark that the king called Satan himself came back to shore, the king focused his pistols on it and started to sing Trouble in full. As Elvis' beautiful voice serenaded the hellish scene, the massive demonic shark jumped out of the water to dare strike the king of rock and roll. Elvis quickly unloaded on the hellish shark, causing its blood to fall upon me and the king himself. Elvis emptied both of his golden pistols into the demon from hell. The fallen beast died as it landed next to me. I gazed into what seemed like Satan's eye. It was a pure, black, heartless eye that was in the process of dying, though it was hard to tell that the beast was dead due to its soulless nature. I saw the king put his perfect boot on its head. He then wasted the remaining bullets of his right gun into the shark's head. He then holstered both pistols and grabbed me. I screamed in horror as I saw that both of my legs had been mauled to pieces. The king then crouched and picked me up. Elvis then turned to look at his boat. There were still 2 to 3 sharks left. I moaned in pain. Elvis nodded and said, "Don't worry, baby. I got morphine and pills on deck. I'm going to get you off this fallen vessel and take you home. There's a bunch of people looking forward to seeing you again." I moaned in pain. I spoke, "Elvis, I thought you were dead." The king smirked as he held me tight. He then jumped like a professional to his police boat. I screamed in pain as I felt weak from the blood loss. The king placed me gently down on what looked like a bed. He said, "Hold on now, I gotta get us away from these evil waters." My eyes opened in horror as I saw the remaining sharks come to devour the tiny police boat. The king only smirked as he turned and karate chopped the first shark that dared to escape the ocean waters to attack us. The shark was eager to taste the king's flesh, but he quickly karate chopped it in half. The beast's blood and guts falling all over us, staining his perfect 70s outfit. Elvis' cape flapped, writhing in the wind as he jumped up in the air to karate kick the other shark that tried to drag me into the deepest reaches of the sea. As Elvis came back from his present karate skills, he pulled out both golden guns and quickly reloaded them as the last shark came to shore, its malicious maw biting and damaging the police boat. Elvis finally finished reloading, then opened fire onto the shark, quickly killing it as he fired over 18 rounds. As the last shark died, the queen quickly turned to me, looking like a professional badass. He then reloaded his golden pistols, looking them over proudly. I moaned in discomfort as the king holstered his weapons. Elvis then looked at how bloody his white suit was. He then flushed out his cape and went to the medical box. He quickly took it and came near me. He then opened it and began to stop my blood loss. Mr. Presley then took off his golden belt and tied it tightly around my leg that was losing the most blood. He then took out a needle and filled it with morphine. He said, "Don't worry, Texas. The pain will soon be over and thy tears will be wiped from your face. Give me your arm, man." I gave the king my right arm. He injected morphine into me. Within a minute, the deep pain I felt below ended. I cried tears of relief. The king stood up and gazed upon my fallen, sinful form. He seemed like an archangel of God, his golden glasses glistening in the sunlight. A brief gust of wind came and made his illustrious cape flap in the wind. Elvis was covered in shark blood. He turned to look at the dead shark on deck. He kicked it off his police boat only to turn quickly to go to the captain's quarters. Elvis began to sail us away from this hell called the sea. He pulled out a radio and said, "The king to home base. I found Texas and I'm bringing him back home. Let his mom and wife know that he is about to see their glory as well as the true kings." I then heard what sounded like a celestial language respond to Elvis. The king placed the mic to the radio back in its holster. He quickly spanned the captain wheel towards the east. The sun above was shining ever so brightly down upon us. It felt like Elvis Presley himself was sailing me into the very sunlight. I began to cry as I thought of my dead wife. So much sorrow fell upon me as I felt like I was at death's door. Before I could lose myself in the sea of hell, I heard Elvis laugh. His laugh brought me back to what seemed like heaven, or rather my present reality. I tried to sit up but realized that my lower half was gone. I came to the realization that I must be dead, for the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, is dead. Yet here he was, saving my life once more. I used what little energy I had left to sit up. I looked at him as he sailed further eastward into the comforting sun. He looked majestic, even covered in shark's blood. I looked around me and noticed that somehow we were in calmer waters. The gateway to hell was far past behind us. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard the king say, "You know, man, I know a certain lady that is ready to see you again. She told me a lot about you, on how she met you long ago in King Shark Fisheries. I told her, is that Texas I pulled over for speeding? She said it was. That my advice to you helped you, got your life back on track. I'm glad that the good Lord used me to bring you home, son. Are you ready to go home to that palace that is waiting all good men like you?" I felt such a peace that surpassed my understanding. The sun's warm ray felt even warmer. I was never a deeply religious man, but I felt like what my mom used to tell me was the presence of God. I sighed in relief as the sun basked me in its lovingly fatherly light. The king said, "It's time we both go home, man. You ready, baby?" I nodded with peaceful tears falling from my eyes. I said, "Mr. Presley, would you please sing to me?" The king smirked as he sailed us further east into the very sun itself. He said, "What do you want to hear, man? Or rather, what's your favorite song of mine?" I thought for a moment and was speechless. The king said, "I know I got a lot of good songs, but what's the first one that comes to mind?" I sighed in peace as I felt myself so at peace with God and the world. I said very calmly, "Return to Cinder." The king smirked as he nodded. He said, "It's time for me to take you home, Texas. Just sit back and relax. At your request, here's a song that you want to hear. Return to Cinder." Elvis composed himself and then spun the wheel further east into the sun. I closed my eyes as the king sang me Return to Cinder. As I focused on this beautiful melody, I began to have visions of my dead mother and wife Aurora. They were both clothed in beautiful white robes, waiting for me in an illustrious, fantastical palace made of gold within the sun. As the king sang my favorite song, I realized that I was finally coming home to that grand palace in the sky. The king screamed out, singing Return to Cinder. I felt the love of my mother and wife, and what I could only fathom as God. I closed my eyes as the king of rock and roll sang my favorite song. I began to laugh in joy as the light of the sun tenderly caressed my face. I lost myself once more in Elvis Presley's beautiful music. As I sailed onwards into the sun of heaven, I smirked. I realized this was the second time Elvis Presley had saved my life. Fin.